Welcome to Marketing, the science of marketing strategy, a bi-weekly podcast where all the cool marketers discuss their favorite marketing strategies, study by study. On this show, we feature marketing risk takers who believe long-term wins for the customer equal long-term wins for the business too. How? Human-led marketing, the combination of where science, creativity, and strategy meet, or as we also like to call it, Markegy. Let's break down the marketing trends, myths, and methodologies together. I'm your host, Leanne Dowweimer. Let's go. As we begin to explore the different channels, strategies, and tactics available to marketers on the Markegy podcast, I thought that starting at the beginning with podcasting itself would be a great opportunity to dive into how blending creativity, curiosity, and collaboration end up in a triple win. We'll be talking about the power of podcasting and investigating ways in which it can be a powerful networking tool, a way to collaborate with others, and build quality relationships. I am so excited to be joined today by none other than Joseph Lewin, the talented and insightful host of the Strategic Marketer podcast and director of demand generation at Proofpoint Marketing. We'll be talking about the power of podcasting and investigating ways in which it can be a powerful networking tool, a way to collaborate with others and build quality relationships. Joseph should know he's got at least 30 episodes under his belt, and they've all ended up just beautifully done. So I'm really looking forward to hearing his point of view. Thanks for listening. Let's just dive in. I believe you might have had, a post or a tagline that you were looking for guests maybe at some point. And I tried to slide into your DMs and be like, hey, can I be a guest? And you're like, I've got so many. But you offered very generously to join me on my own. That's the correct story, right? I'm not.
Yeah, no, that sounds about right. Yeah, I end up having probably a little bit too long of a list. And then it's like, I can't keep up on the editing, getting them out fast enough. So at one point I ended up having like 3 months of podcasts recorded. And I'm like, hey, we'll record this podcast, but it's going to come out in like 2025. So yeah, I got a little behind.
But that just speaks to the power of putting something on your LinkedIn for business-centered podcast and having that inbound, queries, I guess, if we want to be like super technical as an inbound query, but having people just slide into your DMs and you can find like who it attracts and who's a good fit and just different ways to work together. And I think that's part of the cool part about social media and LinkedIn, because there's, a litany of not cool parts. But this is one of the better examples of how it just creates that open-ended network that you can pull from and join and create cool things with.
Absolutely.
I think I've overused my quota for cool today, but
yeah, I mean, LinkedIn is absolutely amazing for doing just that. And I mean, I've been on LinkedIn actively since like 2015, and then there's a 2-year break in there from 2019 to 2021, just because I was starting in a new industry that I hadn't worked in, and I was having to learn all about that industry to market. I was still doing marketing, but in the engineering space. So it was like a lot of time learning about technical engineering stuff. And I was like, didn't have the bandwidth to be posting on LinkedIn as regularly. But almost all of my professional relationships and the best jobs that I've had in marketing so far have come from LinkedIn, either, finding a job on LinkedIn or networking, and same with vendors that I've worked with, that I've hired in to do different projects. And back when I was running my own business, a lot of my clients came from meeting people on LinkedIn. So it's definitely an extremely valuable place to be spending time when it comes to social media. I think you actually can see a pretty good ROI, return on investment, and return on the relationships that you build, much stronger on LinkedIn than, for me, any other social platform so far.
Yeah, I agree completely. When I was running my own business, I had more higher quality leads because people would see my content, they would know my vibe, how I run things, what type of customer I'm a good fit for, and they would see that and we would interact and we would build a relationship. And I think that relatability is what's hugely impactful across all mediums, is like whether or not you're relatable, they can feel your warmth, or they know what to expect. and there's less surprises. So there's so much to this. And I'm so excited that you mentioned so many cool things about how you've been active on LinkedIn. What is an example of, not necessarily this interaction, but another one where LinkedIn or podcasting has done something impactful for you?
Yeah. So I could give a couple examples. So probably the first big one was that I was working with the head of sale. I mean, he's really the head of sales and marketing at my previous company. And there was this one particular account that we had that was kind of they weren't really utilizing our product as well as they needed to be. And so they really need to be spending more money with us to get what they were looking for, but they were contemplating getting rid of us altogether because they weren't seeing the value. And so we were having to be like, guys, you're not seeing it because you're not like spending what you need to actually see the value from this. And so they were having conversations with high level executive people that were kind of far removed from actually using the product. So I ended up finding somebody at that company who had engaged with some of our content that was much closer to the actual product. And so I reached out to her, invited her to come on the show, and she came on. We had a great conversation. And then I asked her if she'd be willing to create some content for our website specifically. So then we did another episode that was more focused on what we actually did and in the zone of what our company could help with. And then from there, she had brought up what we actually do and how it was something they were struggling with. And so then it was a really easy conversation for me to go, hey, we could really help you guys with that. Would you be open? And we actually already are working with you guys in a different division. Would you be open to learning a little bit more about what we do and I can get you in touch with the people on your team who are working on this project. And so, yeah, I mean, we ended up getting this demo and with her and helping to broaden that conversation out from that executive team who was pretty disconnected into people who were actually using the product and being affected by not having kind of the full version of our product on a day-to-day basis. And then I ended up leaving before that. I got to see that like all the way through to my current role. But just being able to get a conversation like that at all, if I would have just reached out to her cold and said, hey, do you want to jump on a demo? No way that she would have done that. Absolutely no way. So that's that one story.
It would no, I mean, that's a great one because you're right. Like we have people whose entire jobs are trying to pitch to get into the demo stage. And, instead of it starting in like this cold, like random outreach, it really was relevant and it made sense. And you guys were able to talk through and collaborate on it. And I think that collaboration is really one of the largest part about being customer centric, because at the end of the day, if we aren't answering our customers' needs, wants, desires, then what are we doing?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and this in particular is a cool example because she didn't have a lot of exposure on LinkedIn before, and she had never been on a podcast or talked about her expertise. And she really knows her stuff. I mean, she's extremely smart. And so it's valuable to her because she's getting exposure outside of where she normally would. I'm highlighting her expertise and helping her be able to express her ideas in a way that comes across well, and then I'm sharing that to my audience, and so it just makes her look better. It adds value. It adds actual, real, tangible value to her. And so even if the conversation didn't amount to anything from the demo perspective, and maybe it didn't, I don't actually know where that led in the end of the day, but I'm still friends with her and we still have conversations now, and it opens up doors for her that she wouldn't have necessarily had before, and helps her to see that what she has is really valuable. So to me, that's really the value of this collaborative content versus cold pitching, because we all get cold pitched all the time. I mean, all the time. I get so much spam. And then, I see people and these sales guys on LinkedIn. I'm not against salespeople and I'm not 100% against cold calling or cold emailing, but I see these people who are like, oh yeah, this guy spammed me 3 or 4 times in a row. And it's like a VP of sales. And he's like, keep going, buddy. You'll get me one of these days. And it's great. And I'm like, don't encourage that. It's spam. Nobody should be calling you three times, in a row, or nobody should be doing that. It's not persistent. It's spam. It's annoying. It's obnoxious. And it's not actually doing anything for me as the customer. But instead, if that same person reached out to me and they said, hey, you're an expert in your area, I'd love to have you on and promote you and your ideas and help you to get more exposure. It's like, for sure, you know? And then I'm going to be much more open to having a conversation with them about their product so they get value out of it. But I get value out of that conversation rather than just losing 15 minutes or half an hour or an hour and then having somebody follow up with me for weeks or months and pester me when I'm not actually interested in their product. You know, you have that going on and on and on with no value to the customer. Whereas this way, you could reach out to that same person, add a ton of value to them, build your company's brand. And in the end of the day, everybody wins in that situation versus can I book 15 minutes on your calendar?
Absolutely. It changes it from the I to the we. And I think you mentioned a couple things in there that I really want to kind of circle back to. Um, but you mentioned that she really knows her stuff and that she wasn't getting any exposure. And I think that that kind of leads into another thing that you and I were talking about prior to recording was that people don't know if you're existing in a vacuum and you aren't sharing what you know, you aren't sharing your expertise, you aren't having these conversations in public, no one's going to know what you can do. And then you mentioned, about candidates. Do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, just I'm in the middle of hiring right now. And out of 20 people that I've interviewed so far for this particular position, I had before this week last weekend, I had one person connect with me or message me on LinkedIn. I think I probably had like 4 people connect with me. One person messaged me, and that was just basically say, "Hey, nice talking to you. Looking forward to next steps." You know, which is okay, better than nothing. But then earlier in this week, I had somebody who was a candidate reach out to me, and she had applied on Friday. Monday, she sends me a video, an amazing video where she went to my profile, was like reading through it, saying things that stuck out to her about me. It's like, well, that always feels good when somebody does that, right? And it's a video of her, her face in the corner on my profile. So it's clearly like she made it for me. It's not just something random.
Yeah.
And she talked about things that she clearly had to do some research to find, or had to have read through my profile and think about what she was going to say. Then she told me about herself, and then she went over the job description and said, these are the things that stuck out to me about this job. This is why I want to work at Proofpoint. And I was like, dang, I need to get on the phone with this candidate. And it put her 100% up at the top, at least to get an initial call and have a conversation. And so, I mean, she skipped the stack for sure by doing that. And I mean, stood out from everybody times 10 by taking an extra 15 minutes maybe to
Yeah.
to do the work on that. So, and then while we're talking about candidates, to kind of bring it full circle into co-collaborating to create content and that leading job opportunities. So you were asking me about the podcast and relationships that have formed out of that. So, my current boss, I saw him post on social media on LinkedIn about building relationships at scale, and that's what marketing is about. I hadn't heard anybody say that before. So I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. Interesting. Mike, love to have you on my show to talk about building relationships at scale. So I had him on the show. And after the conversation, I had reached out to him to see if he'd be willing to share with me like his sales process and what he's doing there. So we had another conversation. And then after that, he's like, hey, I have this job opportunity. I think you'd be a great fit for it. Do you want to interview for this role? And I don't believe they'd even like promoted the role at all to that point. So I interviewed, and within a week got hired on there, and it's been by far the best job I've ever had. Definitely most within my sweet spot. And that came from building relationship through creating content and being active on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. And I heard that podcast too. I listened to it right around the same time that we first connected. And I was like, wow, this is a really great conversation. And you could feel that magic as the person on the end. And I think that that's part of another, like, kind of makes the triple threat of podcasting and content creation, where you're showing your face, you're showing your personality, you're showing your expertise, is that connection and that charisma and that vibe translates beyond just the two people having the recorded conversation, because then other people see how you react. And it's like the candidate that you mentioned that did her own self interview, is that you really get familiarized with that person, their mannerisms, and it's building half the relationship already. And that's so powerful.
Yeah,
Because
I mean, and then
yeah,
your product has to stand up in the end, or your skill set has to stand up in the end, but it gets you past a huge hurdle, which is getting your foot in the door and actually having a conversation. And um I mean, I can't tell you how many people just reach out directly to me on LinkedIn and try to get me to buy their stuff. And I'm like, I don't know you from a hole in the wall. I don't really need what you're offering that I know of. And then you're asking for time on my calendar, and I'm busy, and not just from work. I got other things going on in my life besides just chatting with, 20 salespeople a week that want 15 minutes to a half an hour on my calendar, not to mention the endless follow up because they're going to be professionally persistent that they're going to give me after that. So it's like you got to do something that shows that you care about the other person, that you value them, that you value their business, that you're looking out for their best interest, and build that trust. And if you can do that, it makes that next step of saying, hey, I have something valuable to offer you so much more authentic and easier, right? And that's where reaching out to them to create some content with them, whether it's, I mean, it could be as simple as like a TikTok video where you're asking them to respond to it. I mean, I don't really spend time on TikTok. It's not really my thing, but it could be something as easy as that, like something really simple. It doesn't even have to be like this huge, complicated, start a podcast and do all that. You could start super simple.
yeah. And I mean, the thing I like about all the short form video content, TikTok or Reels or however you want to execute it, is that it's biteable. It can give you those little chunks of a relationship. It gives you those 17 touches or 30 touches or whatever number of touches you're really after, in a more robust way than, hi, my autoresponder would like you to have 15 minutes on my calendar so that I can pre-qualify you and send you to the next person, who will then send you to the AE, who will then meet you with the sales engineer. And then you can execute 10 more steps of our B2B like buyer's journey. And you're
Right.
like, no, no,
Leave me alone.
like no candy, no one's home, like lights out. Like, and yeah, and I think that part of it too is cutting past the official flows and just having more of an organic flow. I'm very much team organic over team performance, as far as marketing, and in that sense more towards demand gen. But it's in a way, it's PRing your own career, it's PRing your friends' careers, it's doing what as marketers we do best, which is sharing messaging that matters to people.
Yeah, and I guess the last thing I'll say on this like note, and I think it would be helpful maybe to talk through some what, like, practically how could somebody start doing this. Okay, so one last thing before we move on to steps that people could take to start really implementing this, creating content together, is a lot of people think you have credibility because of your degree or because of your skill or because of some past project, and that can help. And it definitely, especially if you're on a project that's like highly visible and lots of people know about it, if you like help to design TikTok's algorithm and you can show that, that definitely could give you some credibility on its own. But for the most part, people look for credibility based on the amount of influence that somebody actually has. And if they're getting in front of other people, and if they're trusted by people that you trust, you're more likely to trust them. So the whole idea behind that is you get credibility by association. It's one of the fastest ways to gain credibility. So if you think of somebody, whether you like them or not, whether you agree with them or not, if you think of somebody like Joe Rogan, he has an incredible amount of credibility in lots of areas and lots of people's minds because he has people on that are very well known, that are very well, some of them are very well respected, some of them aren't, it kind of depends, but they're very well known. And he's pretty much been the top podcast for a long time because he's having people on that he's borrowing their credibility or influence, one of the two. They both are. Maybe for him it's more influence than credibility might be a better way to say it. So he's gaining influence off of other people's influence. And you can also gain credibility off of other people's credibility. I think that's probably a better way to say it. If you don't have credibility yourself right now and you don't have influence, one of the best ways to gain influence is to not get on and talk about how much you know. It's to get on and ask very thoughtful questions to people who really do know what they're talking about and are already respected. And by just being on a video with them, you're going to get credibility. And if you ask good questions and you get them to share something they haven't shared before, people are going to assume that you know what you're talking about much more than if you just come out and say, hey, I'm so smart, listen to all the things I have, look at my degrees and all these cool companies I've worked for. That's not going to do it nearly as fast as having conversation with people.
Absolutely. And I think, when, coming back to the implementation steps, is that background work that you do when you are coming up with the questions, you are planning, you are setting up whatever tech stack you're going to use, and having kind of a standard operating procedure or just a protocol that you follow, so that you know what to expect, they know what to expect, I think really can be impactful. What are some of those things that you started doing early on that you found just made it just work so much better and more efficient and the experience better for you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the first thing is that you just need to do it. So it's really easy to let all kinds of things get in the way. Like, what am I going to use to record? Do I have a nice enough setup and mic and camera? And am I going to record on Riverside or StreamYard, or am I going to publish all the podcasting platforms, or is it just for social media? Those are all great questions and are things you should think about. But if you spend a lot of time on those questions, you could be 3 months out, 6 months out before you actually launch anything. So, I mean, my first piece of advice is just find somebody and get on a Zoom call and record it, and then publish the full conversation without editing it on social media or somewhere. And then you can build out from there, and you're going to learn from that. And you're going to go, wow, Zoom is really not the best place to be recording. And, maybe if I had the chance to edit this, it'd be great. An even faster way to do it would be to just like do LinkedIn Live or do a live, which I actually haven't done. And I'm a little bit nervous to do that, but it's definitely the fastest and easiest way to get going because you don't have to edit it afterwards. And you're going to build those relationships with people. You're going to learn, you're going to start to see some of the pitfalls. And then you could start to go, okay, what area do I want to focus on first? So, I mean, that would be the first piece of advice.
Yeah, getting started. There's no such thing as a perfect strategy. It's the one you do.
Yeah. So, I mean, I could give some specifics on what I did. So for me, yeah. I was in like late 2020, early 2021, I was taking a bunch of courses on totally different areas. So one of them was PR, one of them was about SEO. And they basically came down and they're like, in the end of the day, if you want to build backlinks, which is really important for SEO, it comes down to having relationships with people who are doing the same thing as you at sites that are extremely authoritative. And if you have that, you're going to get backlinks. And if you don't, ultimately you're not. You could do a lot of cold outreach, you could do all these different things, but make some friends that control the blog at these big publications and you're going to be set. And then, from a PR perspective too, like if you're going to be good at PR, you need to build relationships with reporters, and those reporters need to know who you are. You need to have added value to them by sharing articles that have nothing to do with what you're doing. You make their job easier. And if you make their job easier and they know they can trust you, they know you bring them good stories, then when you throw in a story or two of yours or something that you need promoted, they're going to be happy to do that for you. So, they kept coming down to relationship. And that kind of set me on this trail of going, okay, how do we do this relationship thing better? So then I found some people in my industry that I just got on and recorded for my company's website. So I did an interview about a subject that I knew I was going to write a blog about anyway. And it made writing the blog way easier. Then it wasn't me doing a tons of research. It was me leaning on the expertise of somebody else, having a video to go along with it, which makes it better for SEO and better for sharing on social and better, pretty much across the board. And then it took me probably like 20% of the time to actually write the article because I had all the content there. It was just a matter of reformatting it into text. And then I ran across James Carberry from Sweetfish Media, and he has a book called Content-Based Networking, which is all about what we're talking about. And that kind of like really started turning my gears on, okay, this is definitely something to be running after. So then I recorded a couple more interviews for my company's website. And then I just decided my company wasn't ready to start a podcast at that time. I'm gonna start a podcast of my own, and that's where the Strategic Marketer was born. And yeah, that's kind of how I started doing it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I am at those earlier stages where I am like, hey, you know what? I've got a computer with a camera. I can reach out to people. I know how to record these because I was recording lives and creating content for clients previously. And, at the end of the day, I can put it off, put it off, put it off. But at some point, you either got to do it or just say you're not going to do it. And so here I am doing it. And I'm really excited. Um, the basic things that I feel like I need putting my marketing hat on to get started is understanding what type of stuff I want to talk about, understanding who wants to hear it and where they listen to stuff, the basic mechanics of the being an individual contributor of, pressing record and distributing it and scheduling or editing or finding a producer. And I think that you mentioned Sweetfish Media, and I actually have a connection from LinkedIn who used to work there, who is a podcast producer. And in my new role, I'm even busier than I was before, and so my time is limited for editing, which is I used to do more video editing and creating graphics, but now I can set my time to record and do this part, and then have a partner in that other aspect. And so there's ways to do it without it turning into this big iceberg of a project,
Yeah.
and you just get started.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's probably the biggest learning I've had in marketing over the last, I mean, my biggest learning in marketing overall is I'm kind of a perfectionist by nature. And so I like going all in and making something great. And my biggest mistake cost me about 3 months when I was running my own business, and probably kept me from really being able to scale, because I created this thing that was awesome, but nobody knew about it. And I didn't have the timeline or budget to like really keep promoting it, because I'd put all this effort into making the actual content great. But then also, like, how do I know that it's great when I couldn't get people to go through it and give me feedback? So like, I would have been better off to just start with something really small and have one piece that wasn't fully iterated, and then get feedback as early as I could and start learning from putting it out there, and then growing from that. So, I mean, definitely just find somebody to record. And hey, if you're talking about marketing, I'll be that person. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. And if you need somebody to be a guinea pig and be your first person on the recording, I'll jump on with you, and we could record, and it'll be fun. And you could do that before you turn it into a podcast and turn it into this whole big thing. And to your point, try to figure out how to make it as simple as possible. Simplify and streamline. I guess a couple other tips I give. I mean, tech stack wise, I use Riverside for recording. It's really inexpensive, and I really like it. It's pretty intuitive and straightforward. We're on StreamYard right now. I don't know that much about it, so but
I like it. It's straightforward, but it's not super complicated. But go ahead. What else do you use?
And then I use shoot, why is my mind running blank right this second? I use Sounder FM for hosting my actual podcast, and I pay for the pro version. It's like $12 a month or something. And I use Calendly to schedule people for my podcast, and have like a pre-interview scheduling link and an interviewing scheduling link, and try to make that as simple as possible. And then my initial conversation, I usually do that over Zoom, and then do the actual recording in Riverside. I'm trying to think what else from a tech perspective. I have this mic that I've had forever, and just pulled it out, and then like a Logitech, off computer camera. And I mean, you could have for like $100, 200 if you want to get a really nice camera. You could have a microphone and a camera that will be just fine for doing, especially initial recording. I guess the only other thing I'd really emphasize is doing the pre-interview is extremely important. I will never host a podcast personally without doing a pre-interview with the guest first, unless they're like a celebrity, and in that case, that's okay. But if you're looking to build relationships, it's a second touch relationship, so your relationship is stronger. The episode's stronger because you're able to ask much better questions. You ask the simple questions in the first round, And then those get you right into the really good questions when you go to do the actual interview. And then the final piece of it is you already are friendly with the person before you start recording. And so you have much more rapport during the conversation. And I find that to be absolutely invaluable.
Yeah, definitely agreed. As we're sitting here, I'm like, man, maybe I should have thought of better questions. Um, but the thing is too is that flexibility. I think one of the mistakes I made when I was first acting as like, kind of like a host or MC for clients was trying to be too controlling about it and too, break down and very, very like, okay, we're gonna spend 30 seconds on this. That's not how you facilitate a great conversation. And so that was a learning experience for me professionally, was to kind of let go a little, but still have good questions. My questions are always teed up to make the other person look better. So my goal is never, I'm not trying to be the Barbara Walters of podcasting. I am not trying to get that like inside scoop deep cut. I'm trying to set up my friend or, someone else so that they come across as their best selves and really be like that teammate. And that makes the whole thing go better when people know that you're on the same side.
Yeah, oh, I love that approach. And I'm now produce and like head up strategy for podcasts for clients, and that's definitely something that we're emphasizing with them. Like how do you make the guests look really good, and how do you make the better, same thing we were talking about before. People are going to like you better, both the guest and people that are listening, if you make the guests look good. I mean, you don't want to like be over the top about it, but you want to get their expertise out and help them formulate their ideas better and ask them questions that helps them to share their idea in a more clear way. And if you do that and you make them look really good, they're going to want to work with you in the future, whether that's collaborating on a future project or becoming a customer. Much more likely that's going to happen if they feel like you made them the star of the show versus the other way around. And then you could have, point of view episodes or something like that, which I probably will start doing on my podcast sometime in the near future, where you can share your expertise, but then you don't have a guest on, and don't steal the show from the guest is an excellent tip.
Definitely. Let's see. We have just a little bit of time left, and it's hard to encapsulate like on these notes. I'm not totally just kissing your butt here, but you have had like anyone who listens to your podcast can feel your expertise, and I think that's something you do exceptionally well. What have been some of your favorite episodes or guests that you felt like just really made that impact, for better lack of a better word?
So I would say some of my favorite guests are Ravi. I'm trying to remember his Ravi Kiasaram. He talked about, I think we talked about business acumen. I also recorded a different episode with him for my company's website, my previous company's website. So, but yeah, I think it was business acumen and like growing as a marketer beyond being seen as like a generalist marketer into more of like, how do you get a senior role, or how do you like really move up in your marketing career? And that's understanding things outside of marketing. So his was really excellent. And then there's another guy named Paul Hepperla, and he is a VP of strategy at Emerson. So they do like pumps and motors and industrial products, or at least in his in his division. And he's just a very knowledgeable, humble guy. So it was a really fun conversation with him. And then one of my other favorite ones is Stephanie Casimir. She works at ABB Motors, and she talks about product marketing, and she's just really smart. She's really great at interviewing customers and helping to understand. She helps position the engineering and R&D team to understand what they actually need to develop by talking with customers and understanding what the needs are in the market, so that they're not spending a ton of R&D effort on something that seems really cool from the engineering perspective, but nobody's actually going to want to buy. So those were all episodes where I felt like we had good rapport. It was great conversation back and forth, but then also I learned a lot from each of those episodes myself.
Awesome. Wow. So And we're about out of time. So I want to say thank you so much for letting me borrow your with your cool microphone and all of your knowledge. And I'm so excited for this and, podcasting as a journey.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I'm humbled and flattered by by your praise, and look forward to a future conversation.
Great. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Marketing, the science of marketing strategy. If any of the strategies we talked about today inspired you to learn more, try them. Remember, the perfect strategy doesn't exist, only the one that gets done. Subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast player to make sure that you never miss an episode. Thanks for listening. Until next time.